Today we're taking a look at some NHL trade speculation around teams like the Maple Leafs, the Flames, and the New Jersey Devils, and Washington Capitals forward Tom Wilson is in hot water again with NHL player safety. We'll discuss that situation coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have some trade rumors I want to take a look at, but first up, let's talk about what happened last night between the Washington Capitals and the Boston Bruins, which has gotten forward Tom Wilson in some hot water here yet again. Now, Tom Wilson, of course, most of you are likely aware, has a long history of bad hits and has been suspended multiple times. The last time Wilson was suspended, he was originally given 20 games, which was appealed to NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman and ultimately was reduced down to 14. But certainly the history there is not great. He's been in trouble with the league multiple occasions. Now, of course, based on the rules to be a repeat offender, it's like a 2-year history is what they look at. Wilson's actually gotten more than 2 years under his belt now of not being punished or being disciplined for anything additional. His last suspension was in the fall of 2018. So from that perspective, he's not considered a repeat offender anymore. But last night, there was a hit that sent Brandon Carlo, defenseman for the Bruins, to the hospital. He certainly appears to be hurt, likely is concussed. I don't know the exact diagnosis if the Bruins have really given out a whole lot of details in that regard, but you could tell instantly that he was hurt badly, and they said we later found out that he was escorted to the hospital. He was released this morning as well, which is a positive sign, but doesn't mean he's going to be getting back to playing hockey anytime soon. Now, of course, I can't show the hit here, of course. The NHL is pretty strict when it comes to copyright laws. If you show any coverage, they do offer copyright claims and strikes against your channel pretty quickly. So we're not going to show what happened, but essentially, as Carlo was in the corner with the puck, there was another Capitals player behind him, which I believe was Verana, but correct me if I'm wrong on that. Wilson came in, and obviously he made a really hard hit, and obviously it looks like the first point of contact might not have been the head. It's hard to tell because it happened so fast. I've watched it so many times, different angles, try to slow it down. It looks as though there could be some contact made with like the upper body, shoulder area first, ever so slightly, but the problem is when Wilson went in, he brought his hands in front of him, and that's what drove right into Carlo's face and drove his head into the glass. It was a bad illegal hit. I do think that it could have been possibly avoided. Now, this is not being called an illegal check to the head. Let's clarify that as well. This is a situation that it technically doesn't meet the criteria for illegal check to the head. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to disagree with that, but technically, based on the rules, that is not the case. But they are going after him for boarding, which should have been called by the referees. It was not. There was no call on the ice. That's going to be factored in here. And he was also offered an in-person hearing, which gives the league the ability to suspend for more than 5 games. So clearly a suspension's coming. If they were considering, maybe not suspending, it would not have been an in-person hearing. I don't think we've ever seen a case of an in-person hearing being offered and then no suspension being granted or delivered afterwards. So fair to say he's going to be suspended. It's just really a matter of how many games are they going to be able to give him here in this scenario. Now, like I said, it's a bad scenario. He has a reputation of being a headhunter and being careless out there. I think he has made, at least it appears as though, more of an effort in recent years to kind of try to take that part out of his game while still playing physical and being intimidating out there. But this was just a bad scenario. I feel bad for Brandon Carlo. He did kind of put his head down for a second as he was kind of searching for the puck. But I honestly don't think it really would have mattered a whole lot. Wilson was coming in like a freight train with his arms in front of him and ended up getting him right in the head and then said head into the glass. And it was just something you don't want to see. Now, there could be some that agree or disagree, and this is nothing about being soft or snowflakes, as people like to be called nowadays. This is a man's brain that we're talking about here, being rattled off the glass with extreme force from a huge guy like Tom Wilson. So this is not something that we can see in the NHL. I personally really am a fan of the physical style of game. That's what part of what drew me to hockey was the contact. I like the hitting, but in an illegal way. We don't need to be targeting the head. I mean, that's something that's not necessary at all, and oftentimes, not always, unfortunately, can be avoided, but it is such a fast-paced game. There are times that it's really hard to avoid, but when it's possible to avoid and you can take a different trajectory or kind of change your angle a little bit to avoid those things, then the players are expected to do that. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. And now I know the hearing is being done, and obviously where it's in person as well. They're not doing in person because of COVID, but it is offered in person. So it would be like a video chat through Zoom is essentially what's offered instead of just talking about it on the phone. That is being done this evening. So as I record this video, I don't know if we're going to get the announcement or if it'll come tomorrow when they review everything and make their decision. But still, it's something that we should have results on here relatively soon. So once we have the results from NHL Player Safety, check down below. The pinned comment might be updated, or depending on what it is, I may end up doing a separate video to discuss their decision. So that's certainly a possibility, but hopefully we'll get those results sooner than later. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to take a look at some trade talk around a few NHL teams. I want to start with the New Jersey Devils. Now, word has it that the New Jersey Devils are essentially pretty well open for business. They're a team that's not expected to really contend for the playoffs. Based right now, that would be difficult for them to achieve, and there's not too many players on that roster, based on what we're hearing, that would be like an untouchable. Obviously, some of their young stars, like newly appointed captain Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes would be in that category, but there wouldn't be a lot of other guys. I mean, you could probably throw Mackenzie Blackwood in there as well, but like, for example, a guy even like Kyle Palmieri or PK Subban very well could be had for the right price as well. And in the case of Subban, given his large contract, and they took on that full cap hit when they made that acquisition as well from Nashville, they very well could offer to retain a big chunk of that salary as well to make it much more affordable for the next team. And one thing with that as well, there's even some teams out there that you would look at and be like, well, maybe PK would be a good fit, maybe he wouldn't. But when it comes to an expansion draft, obviously that's something that a lot of teams are factoring in to be like, well, we already have our 3 defensemen that we'd want to kind of protect. So if we bring in a 4th guy, you know, we might end up losing them. But maybe if the price is right, if they can get him for a cheap enough price at retained salary, maybe teams would want to take on a guy like PK, not only to get this year's playoffs as a boost to having extra depth on the blue line, but maybe he would be somebody they would then turn around and expose in the expansion draft in order to protect the other guys that they'd like to keep intact with the team. So it's certainly something to keep your eye on. New Jersey at this point has not had conversations around contract extensions that we're aware of with any of their pending unrestricted free agents. So they very well could all be up for grabs. Now, in the case of PK, he still has another year left, so we'll have to see how that works out. That's why you'd have to retain some salary, especially more so for next year as well. So New Jersey is a team to keep your eye on, and I would not be surprised if some big names are moved out of New Jersey. Even if they want to consider re-signing a guy like Palmieri, it would make sense for them to try to recoup some different assets now and maybe go after him as a UFA in the open market. I mean, there could still be deals done that way to get even more assets out of this in the long haul. Now, I also want to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, of course, yesterday we talked about the possibility of Taylor Hall being who they target as a top 6 forward acquisition ahead of the deadline. We've heard NHL insider Elliot Friedman recently talk about how the Leafs are expected to be a team to add, given their success this year. They believe that this could be their year. This is the year they could really contend, come out of the North Division, and be a Final Four team. And once you get to that far in the playoffs, anything can happen. So the Leafs have good vibes and good feelings about what they can accomplish this year. So I do expect a guy like Kyle Dubas to go all in as best he can here to give this team as strong a chance as possible to bring home the Stanley Cup and end their 54-year drought. I mean, 1967 has been a long time ago. It's been since 1993 since a Canadian team brought the Cup home. And this very well could end up being the year. We know there's going to be a Canadian team go to a Final Four for sure. So it could be a good chance for that to take place. So clearly Taylor Hall could be a guy that they target, but it may not be. Now, there's an article I want to reference here from the Toronto Sun and Michael Tracos talking about how he feels that adding extra skill isn't what they need. They need to add more grit. So obviously a guy like Hall is certainly a skilled player, but somebody who can play a gritty style. He's always been a guy who's not afraid to to throw his weight around a little bit and be a little bit more of a physical style winger. Obviously, the injuries have piled up over the years, which certainly takes away his ability to be as strong at that as he used to be, of course. But still, this article references that maybe a guy like Mattias Ekholm on the blue line or a Sam Bennett of the Calgary Flames would be the preferred way to go to add that style as well, to kind of add more of that. Then still, they have lots of skill up front. You've got your Tavares and your Matthews and your Marner and your Nylander, even your Thornton and your Spezas and all that are playing well even at their age as well. So adding a guy like Bennett who could be that fourth line player to really add that extra grit, drop the gloves if necessary, or Ekholm on the back end could prove to be extremely valuable. Now, when it comes to Ekholm, of course, you have to look at salary cap as well as expansion draft implications. That might be difficult for them to retain him. So it would obviously boil down to the price to make that acquisition. That might be tough to do. Now, if they can give up a couple of young assets to get Sam Bennett out of Calgary, that would make some pretty good sense. I mean, they have enough prospects that they could certainly part with one or two or a prick or something like that to make that acquisition. I can't see the price on Bennett being very high based on how he's played. I mean, yes, he was drafted very highly, but he hasn't lived up to expectations. So I would think they could get him for a decent price if the Flames decide to pull the trigger on a trade. So we'll have to see if they do, of course. But obviously, Ekholm on the blue line would be a terrific addition by the Leafs. But when you've already got a lot of veteran guys there like Muzzin, you've got Bogosian back there. Obviously, they have Morgan Riley. I don't know if it would make a ton of sense when it comes to expansion draft. I mean, they'd end up losing probably a defenseman for sure. I mean, Justin Hall's played pretty well this year. Like I said, you throw in Riley, you throw in Muzzin, you got Travis Dermott back there who could very well be exposed already. They'd be putting themselves in a position where either Ekholm or somebody that's on the roster now that they might prefer to keep, like a Justin Hall, for example, could find themselves exposed in expansion, and it might hurt longer term. But you know what? If they win the Stanley Cup this year, maybe they won't care. I mean, at the end of the day, Stanley Cup championship teams end up getting dismantled. You lose pieces. That's the way it is. Maybe they'll pay the price if they're able to make it work to go ahead and try to get that Stanley Cup under their belts. I don't know, but let me know what you think. If you had the option of adding a skilled top six winger to the Maple Leafs, or you could look to add some grit like an Ekholm or a Bennett, which direction do you think they should go, and which do you think is best to suit them to be more prepared for playoff hockey? Now, also, I want to talk about the Calgary Flames. Of course, we had a coaching change, which is quite substantial. Daryl Sutter is a very different kind of coach than Jeff Ward. Daryl Sutter is the kind of coach that is very demanding to play for, and he is going to push that team, and I have no doubt that we're going to see stronger effort and better results. To what degree, though, I guess we will see. He said he felt like there was unfinished business. Of course, the Calgary Flames went to the Stanley Cup Finals all those years ago with Sutter, and of course, they unfortunately lost to the Lightning. So clearly, he wants to win a Stanley Cup for the Flames, and he signed on for not only this year, but 2 more years after to make that happen. I would suggest with the Flames that we may not see anything too substantial besides maybe a Bennett trade in the short term. However, if they are a couple of weeks down the road from now and the wins are not piling up and they're not getting closer to being a little bit more secure for a playoff spot, then there are some that believe that a more big shakeup of the core roster could very well be in order here, and that Johnny Gaudreau might be your prime target to sell on a high note. I mean, he's having a good season again. Gaudreau's put together many regular, good, solid seasons and has been a ghost in the playoffs and has been a big part of the issue why they haven't won, in my opinion, and that's kind of where they need Johnny Hockey to be better. And it could be the year that, with 1 more year left on his deal at over $6 million, if they're not going to make the playoffs, this would make sense that they do continue to kind of shake things up in Calgary and go a different mix in their core group of players, and maybe a guy like Gaudreau would make sense to trade. Now, there are some out there, including Sportsnet's Eric Francis, that are hell-bent on saying Johnny Gaudreau, if he's still a Flame when his contract expires, he will not resign, and he's definitely leaving to go to the Eastern U.S., whether it be the Flyers, the Devils, or something in that area where he grew up on the East Coast. And you know what? Maybe he's right. Maybe he's wrong. I mean, there's not much proof out there that he's right. At this point, it's still kind of early and premature. I don't expect Johnny Gaudreau to say anything different to make people think he's going to leave, of course. But you know what? When you have to acknowledge that this team hasn't really gotten over the hump, and if the coaching change does not get them back on track, then I do suspect something big to go down before the deadline, and it makes sense that it could be the time to pull the trigger on a Gaudreau trade. Matthew Tkachuk certainly not going anywhere. And I think the other side with Daryl Sutter, how he likes to play with the forecheck and obviously the physical, aggressive style, he's going to be wanting Matthew Tkachuk to be Matthew Tkachuk. I mean, obviously early in the season, Tkachuk was, seemed to be getting a little bit of a heat from his own team about how he plays and kind of being that pest role. And I don't know. I haven't seen it as much from him in the last really month or more. So, I would think we're going to see a whole new Matthew Tkachuk with the coaching change. So we'll see how that goes as well. But personally, let me know what you think. If the Flames are not trending towards the playoffs, if Sutter can't get them to climb that mountain in the next couple of weeks, do you think it makes sense to consider something more substantial and attack the core of the team and maybe trade out a guy like Johnny Gaudreau? Let me know your thoughts below and we'll discuss further in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.